with incredible up.
The silence in the arena was deafening before tip-off, but nobody could have predicted the storm that was about to be unleashed. After 3 weeks watching from the sidelines, nursing an injury that kept her away from the game she lives and breathes, Caitlin Clark was ready to remind everyone exactly why her name sends shivers down opposing coaches' spines. The target she chose for her grand return couldn't have been bigger or more daunting. The New York Liberty, riding high on their perfect record and looking absolutely untouchable. When Clark first touched the ball, you could feel the electricity crackling through the building. It wasn't just another possession, it was a declaration of war. Without hesitation, she threaded a pass through traffic that seemed impossible, finding her teammate with surgical precision that made veteran point guards take notes. The crowd erupted, understanding immediately that they were witnessing something extraordinary. This wasn't going to be a rusty comeback performance. This was going to be a masterpiece, painted in real time. The chemistry between Clark and Mitchell became apparent instantly, their connection flowing like they'd been practicing together for years, rather than being separated by Clark's extended absence. Every cut, every screen, every movement seemed choreographed by basketball gods themselves. When Clark spotted Aaliyah Boston positioning herself in the paint, the pass that followed looked effortless, but carried the weight of pure basketball genius. Boston was already moving before the ball left Clark's hands, understanding the play 3 steps ahead of everyone else on the court. 3 minutes into the game, Clark had already dished out 3 assists without attempting a single shot. The Liberty defense was scrambling, trying to figure out how to contain someone who seemed to be playing chess, while everyone else was playing checkers. But if they thought limiting her scoring would neutralize the threat, they were about to learn a painful lesson about underestimating greatness. The moment arrived, like lightning striking twice in the same spot. Clark received the ball, sized up her defender, and proceeded to put on a clinic that will be replayed for decades. She attacked the rim with the fury of someone who had been held back too long, absorbing contact that would have sent lesser players crashing to the floor. Not only did she finish through the foul, but she did it with such authority that the entire building rose to its feet in disbelief. The and-one conversion was just icing on a cake that was already too sweet for the opposition to swallow. But what happened next defied all logic and basketball physics. With 90 seconds remaining in the opening quarter, Clark embarked on a 3-point barrage that left commentators speechless and fans reaching for their phones to capture history in the making. The first bomb came from distance that made NBA shooters jealous, sailing through the net with a swish so pure it sounded like music. Before the Liberty could blink, she was launching again, this time from even deeper, the ball tracing a perfect arc that seemed to hang in the air forever before finding its home. The third 3 in that sequence was the cherry on top of an already impossible Sunday. Clark stepped back against Breanna Stewart, one of the league's premier defenders, and let it fly from a distance that would make Steph Curry nod in approval, 30 feet from the basket, maybe more, with a hand in her face and the weight of 3 weeks of anticipation on her shoulders. Swish! The building exploded, grown adults were jumping like children, and somewhere in the Liberty huddle, you could see coaches frantically scribbling notes about how to stop the unstoppable. 20 days of rehabilitation, 20 days of watching teammates battle without her, 20 days of doubt about whether she could return to form. All of that melted away in the span of 58 seconds as Clark connected on 3 consecutive shots from another planet. The Liberty, who had entered the game undefeated and confident, suddenly looked mortal. Their perfect record seemed less perfect when facing someone who was rewriting the rulebook on what constitutes a good shot. When the second quarter began, the Liberty coaching staff had clearly instructed their defenders to give Clark some space, perhaps hoping she would cool off, or that the long-range shooting was just early-game adrenaline. They couldn't have been more wrong. Clark spotted the extra room like a hawk spotting prey from a mile high, and before the Liberty could adjust their defensive scheme, another 3-pointer was ripping through the net. The message was crystal clear. There is no safe distance when guarding greatness. Her confidence was infectious, spreading through the Fever roster like wildfire. Even her practice free throws were dropping with mechanical precision, not even grazing the rim as they found their mark. This wasn't basketball anymore. This was artistry at its finest. Clark had accumulated 17 points on 4 made three-pointers, while her teammates were still trying to find their shooting rhythm. It was a one-woman show masquerading as a team sport. The statistical impossibility of what was unfolding became even more apparent as the first half progressed. Clark had connected on 5 straight three-pointers, with 3 of them coming in a 38-second stretch that defied every law of basketball probability. Lexi Hull began to catch fire as well, contributing to a team effort that was suddenly threatening the franchise record for three-pointers made in a single game. The Fever were no longer just competing, they were putting on an offensive clinic that had NBA scouts taking notes. However, basketball is a game of adjustments, and the Liberty weren't going to surrender their perfect season without a fight. Natasha Cloud, known throughout the league for her physical style of play, began implementing a strategy designed to disrupt Clark's rhythm through aggressive contact and off-ball harassment. The targeting was obvious and unfortunate, representing a darker side of professional basketball where talent is met with intimidation rather than respect. But if Cloud thought a few hard fouls would derail this freight train of excellence, she had severely miscalculated her opponent's mental fortitude. Clark responded to the physical play not with frustration, but with even greater determination. Each bump, each unnecessary contact, each attempt to throw her off her game only seemed to fuel the fire burning inside her. She answered Cloud's aggression with another deep three-pointer to close the first half, a shot so pure and confident that it served as both a scoring play and a psychological statement. The first 20 minutes belonged entirely to Clark, who had single-handedly kept the Fever competitive against a team that hadn't lost all season. The halftime statistics painted a picture of individual brilliance against team excellence. Clark had shot an astronomical 66% from three-point range, connecting on shots that most players wouldn't even attempt in practice. Her court vision remained razor-sharp, creating opportunities for teammates even as opposing defenders draped themselves over her like a second uniform. The Liberty maintained their lead through balanced scoring and superior rebounding, but they had been served notice that their undefeated record was very much in jeopardy. The third quarter opened with Clark demonstrating that her passing wizardry was every bit as dangerous as her long-range shooting. She dissected the Liberty defense with surgical precision, finding teammates in spaces they didn't even know existed. Double teams meant nothing to someone who could thread passes through windows that other players couldn't even see. Her basketball IQ was on full display, orchestrating an offense that began to click on all cylinders. The Liberty's frustration became increasingly apparent as they resorted to more physical tactics in an attempt to slow down the Clark show. Hard screens became harder, incidental contact became more frequent, and the referees found themselves managing a game that was teetering on the edge of chippy. For the undefeated Liberty, facing someone who was single-handedly dismantling their defensive schemes was clearly rattling their composure. They were supposed to be the hunters, not the hunted. Clark remained unflappable throughout the escalating physical play, responding to each aggressive defensive sequence with another display of basketball brilliance. A laser pass to Aaliyah Boston resulted in an easy score, followed immediately by another step-back three from a distance that had fans calculating the physics involved. The Fever were feeding off their stars' energy, playing with a confidence and swagger that had been missing during Clark's absence. Yet every time the Fever threatened to seize complete control of the game, the Liberty demonstrated why they had remained undefeated all season. Sabrina Ionescu and Breanna Stewart began asserting themselves offensively, matching the Fever's scoring bursts with clutch shots of their own. The experience of winning close games showed as the Liberty managed to maintain their composure despite facing the most serious challenge to their perfect record. The most audacious moment of an already audacious performance came when Clark pulled up from logo range, attempting a shot that would have been legendary if it had connected. The crowd rose in anticipation before the ball had even left her hands, understanding that they were witnessing someone operating without normal human limitations. Though the shot ultimately rimmed out, the mere attempt sent a message that reverberated throughout the building. No lead was safe, no distance too far, no shot too difficult when Caitlin Clark was locked in this zone. Entering the final quarter, the Fever remained within striking distance, despite being significantly outmanned on paper. Clark's individual brilliance had given her team something that couldn't be measured in statistics: belief. They believed they could defeat the undefeated. They believed their star player could will them to victory. And they believed that this night could mark a turning point in their season. The fourth quarter unfolded like a heavyweight championship fight, with both teams trading blows and neither willing to concede an inch. Clark attacked the basket with renewed aggression, carving through defensive schemes like they were made of tissue paper. Her passes continued to find their marks with uncanny accuracy, creating scoring opportunities that kept the Liberty defense constantly guessing. The intensity in her eyes suggested she wanted this victory more than anything in her professional career. But the Liberty's championship experience began to show as the game reached its climax. They slowed the pace to their preferred tempo, forced the Fever into difficult shot attempts, and executed defensive stops when they needed them most. Stewart controlled the paint with veteran savvy, while Ionescu provided clutch shooting that matched Clark's heroics shot for shot. The defending champions weren't about to let their perfect record slip away without exhausting every resource at their disposal. Clark's determination never wavered, even as her supporting cast struggled to capitalize on the opportunities she created. A filthy crossover sequence led to another step-back three from NBA range, sending the crowd into hysterics and briefly making it seem like a miraculous comeback was inevitable. The shot was so pure, so confident, so perfectly executed that even Liberty players could be seen shaking their heads in grudging admiration. With the clock winding down and the Fever still fighting for every possession, Clark demonstrated why she's considered one of the most complete players in professional basketball. She chased down rebounds like her life depended on it, drew fouls through aggressive drives to the basket, and continued creating plays for teammates who, unfortunately, couldn't quite finish the comeback story. Her effort was superhuman, her performance was transcendent, but sometimes individual brilliance isn't quite enough to overcome team depth. Clark's final three-pointer of the evening came with under a minute remaining, a deep shot that refused to let the game end quietly. Even in what would ultimately be a losing effort, she continued fighting, continued creating, continued demonstrating why she's must-see television every time she steps onto a basketball court. The Liberty might have escaped with their undefeated record intact, but they had been pushed to the brink by one player returning from a 3-week absence. The final buzzer brought mixed emotions throughout the arena. The Liberty celebrated like they had just survived a playoff elimination game, which in many ways they had. Their relief was palpable, their respect for what they had just witnessed was evident, and their understanding that they had barely escaped with their perfect season was written across their faces. On the other side, Clark's frustration was obvious, but so was her satisfaction with a performance that had reminded everyone exactly who she is. Post-game interviews immediately focused on the physical play, the missed calls, and the near-impossible comeback attempt. Clark handled every question with characteristic grace and competitive fire, declining to make excuses while making it clear that this was just the beginning. Her simple statement that they would see the Liberty again carried the weight of a promise, a threat, and a prediction all rolled into one unforgettable moment. Social media exploded within minutes of the final buzzer, with highlight reels showcasing Clark's 30-foot bombs, no-look passes, and steely determination, circulating faster than wildfire. Fans who had witnessed the performance in person were already calling it one of the greatest individual efforts of the season, made even more remarkable by the fact that it came after nearly 3 weeks away from competitive basketball. NBA players chimed in with their own amazement, comparing her range to the very best shooters in basketball history. The conversation quickly shifted from what had happened to what might happen next. If Clark could perform at this level against an undefeated team after such a long layoff, what would she be capable of once she found her complete rhythm? If the Fever could compete with championship-caliber teams when their star was operating at peak efficiency, what did that mean for their playoff aspirations? The questions were intriguing, the possibilities were endless, and the excitement was building. Fever fans were no longer talking about moral victories or building for the future. They were talking about revenge games, playoff positioning, and championship aspirations. The date of the next matchup with the Liberty was already circled on calendars, with predictions of fireworks and expectations of vindication filling every conversation. Clark had not only announced her return, she had announced her team's arrival as legitimate contenders. League insiders began whispering that this game might have marked a fundamental shift in the WNBA's competitive balance. When one player can single-handedly push the league's best team to the brink after missing 3 weeks of action, it forces every other franchise to recalculate their championship odds. The Liberty remained undefeated on paper, but in the court of public opinion, they had just received their first real scare of the season from a player who seemed to operate by different rules than everyone else. The ripple effects of Clark's performance extended far beyond one game or one rivalry. Coaches around the league were suddenly adjusting their defensive schemes, preparing for the possibility that they might face someone capable of scoring from any position on the court. Players were studying film not just of Clark's shooting technique, but of her mental approach to high-pressure situations. The entire league had been put on notice that greatness doesn't take time off, it just comes back stronger. As the basketball world continued to buzz about what they had witnessed, one thing became crystal clear. Caitlin Clark hadn't just returned from injury. She had returned with a vengeance that promised to reshape the remainder of the season. The Liberty might have escaped with their perfect record intact, but everyone in that building knew they had just witnessed something special, something that would be talked about for years to come, something that reminded us all why we love this beautiful game called basketball. The morning after brought an avalanche of analysis from every corner of the basketball universe. ESPN ran her highlight reel on repeat, with analysts breaking down the mechanics of shots that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Former NBA champions were posting on social media about her court vision, comparing her passing ability to Magic Johnson and her shooting range to Stephen Curry. The conversation wasn't just about women's basketball anymore, it was about basketball, period. And Clark was at the center of it all. What made the performance even more remarkable was the context surrounding it. 20 days of rehabilitation had kept her away from live action, away from the rhythm that professional athletes depend on to perform at peak levels. Most players returning from injury take several games to find their flow, cautiously working their way back to full speed while their bodies remember the demands of professional competition. Clark had bypassed all of that entirely, stepping onto the court against the league's best team and immediately performing like she had never left. The psychological impact on the rest of the league was immediate and profound. Every upcoming opponent was now forced to game plan for someone who had just demonstrated she could single-handedly change the outcome of any game at any moment. Defensive coordinators were staying up late, drawing up schemes that might contain someone who seemed to operate outside the normal boundaries of basketball possibility. The challenge wasn't just stopping her from scoring, it was preventing her from taking over games through sheer force of will and supernatural basketball ability. For the Fever organization, the performance represented validation of everything they had believed about their franchise player. The investment in Clark wasn't just about ticket sales or merchandise, it was about building around someone capable of transcendent moments that elevate entire franchises. General managers around the league took note, understanding that having a player capable of this level of individual brilliance changes every calculation about team building and championship construction. Clark herself handled the aftermath with characteristic humility mixed with quiet confidence. In interviews, she deflected individual praise toward her teammates, while making it clear that the near miss against the Liberty had only increased her hunger for a rematch. Her maturity in handling the spotlight impressed veterans who had seen young stars crumble under similar attention. This wasn't someone who would be satisfied with moral victories or individual accolades. This was someone determined to turn spectacular performances into championship hardware. The injury that had sidelined her for 3 weeks became a footnote rather than an excuse. Clark spoke candidly about the challenges of being away from the game, about not understanding her body's signals, about the learning process that comes with managing physical setbacks in professional sports. Her honesty about the difficulties made her eventual return even more impressive, proving that great athletes don't just overcome external obstacles, they overcome internal doubts and physical limitations. The relationship between Clark and her teammates took on new dimensions following the Liberty game. Players like Aaliyah Boston and Lexi Hull had experienced firsthand what it was like to play alongside someone operating at a completely different level. Their trust in Clark's decision-making grew exponentially, knowing that when she had the ball in her hands, magical things were possible. The chemistry that had been building all season suddenly crystallized into something that looked unstoppable when firing on all cylinders. Opposing coaches began publicly acknowledging the unique challenge that Clark presented to their defensive schemes. Unlike other elite scorers who might be contained through specific tactical adjustments, Clark's combination of range, creativity, and basketball intelligence made traditional defensive concepts obsolete. She could score from anywhere, create for others from any position, and make split-second decisions that kept defenses constantly off balance. Preparing for her required preparation for everything. The broader implications for women's professional basketball were equally significant. Clark's performance against the Liberty had been broadcast nationally, exposing casual sports fans to a level of individual brilliance that demanded attention and respect. Social media engagement around the game reached levels typically reserved for playoff contests or championship games. New fans were discovering the WNBA through Clark's highlight reels, drawn in by performances that transcended gender and simply represented elite athletic competition. Television ratings for subsequent Fever games showed significant increases as fans tuned in, hoping to witness another historically great performance. Clark had become must-see television, the kind of player who could single-handedly drive viewership and attendance through the simple possibility that something incredible might happen at any moment. Marketing executives were taking notes, understanding that they had witnessed the emergence of a truly transcendent sports figure. The technical aspects of Clark's game continued to evolve even as she performed at an elite level. Her shooting mechanics remained flawless under pressure, her footwork showed no signs of rust despite the extended absence, and her conditioning appeared to be at peak levels throughout all 4 quarters. The combination of natural talent and professional preparation was evident in every possession, suggesting that this level of play was sustainable rather than a one-time flash of brilliance. Veteran players around the league offered their perspectives on what they had witnessed, with many expressing amazement at Clark's ability to perform clutch plays under the intense pressure of facing an undefeated opponent. The mental toughness required to attempt shots from logo range with the game on the line impressed competitors who understood the psychological challenges of high-stakes basketball. This wasn't just talent. This was courage and confidence, operating at the highest levels of professional sports. The Fever's coaching staff found themselves in the enviable position of building offensive and defensive schemes around a player capable of extraordinary individual performances. Game plans could be more aggressive, taking calculated risks, knowing that Clark's decision-making and execution could bail them out of difficult situations. Her presence on the court created opportunities for teammates that simply didn't exist when she was absent, opening up driving lanes and creating spacing that made everyone around her more effective. As the season progressed toward the playoffs, every remaining game took on added significance. Clark's return had elevated the Fever from a developing team to a legitimate contender, capable of defeating anyone on any given night when their star player was operating at peak efficiency. The question was no longer whether they could compete with the league's elite teams, but whether they could sustain this level of play when it mattered most. The countdown to the next Liberty matchup became a storyline that captivated the entire league. Both teams knew that their next meeting would carry extra weight, with the Liberty seeking to prove their earlier victory wasn't a fluke, and the Fever determined to complete what they had started. Ticket prices for that future game were already climbing as fans anticipated a showdown between two teams operating at the highest levels of professional basketball. For Caitlin Clark, the Liberty game had served as both a statement and a promise. She had announced her return to the basketball world in the most emphatic way possible, demonstrating that time away had only sharpened her focus and intensified her determination. The league had been officially put on notice that championship aspirations would have to go through Indianapolis, through the Fever, and through a player who seemed capable of rewriting the record books every time she stepped onto the court. The legacy of that single game would extend far beyond the final score or individual statistics. It represented a moment when potential became reality, when talent transformed into greatness, and when one player reminded an entire sport why individual brilliance will always have a place in team competition. Caitlin Clark had returned from injury not just as the same player who had left, but as someone ready to elevate her game and her team to heights that few had previously imagined possible.